Ladies and gentlemen, 2023 has been a wild ride for Marvel Future Fight with plenty of ups, but also plenty of downs. So that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video, the top 10 disappointments in 2023 in this year for Marvel Future Fight. Now, I know I'm saying this with still a couple of weeks to go in the year, so there could be some disappointments around the corner, but hey, you gotta hope that whatever else is coming is doing so without any disappointments there. So coming in at number 10 that I wanted to start off the video with is bad animations, bad skill animations. And this doesn't, of course, go for every single character. We certainly had some that were bangers, but I would say on the whole this year, we've had more lackluster animations than usual. And in particular, I want to highlight, a lot of tier 4s having pretty lame animations, but also just characters in general having pretty lame animations. Lots of recycled animations, lots of animations just being moved around. Loki's animations are essentially recycled more or less. A lot of Shadow Shell's animations are recycled, and that's taking a uniform from the beginning of the year and taking a uniform from the end of the year. You have things like Thanos' tier 3 skill, tier 4 skill, sorry. Despite having damage, it basically has no visual indicator of damage besides the numbers. So as you can see here, when she comes in, there's basically nothing. And yeah, he has this like cool sort of cosmic glow, but where's the sort of the animation, right? Where's the hit? You don't see anything. However, speaking of characters like Thanos, speaking of characters like Summer Luna and Ghost Rider, too many OP or overpowered seasonal uniforms is my number 9 ranking biggest disappointment for this year. And that sort of goes hand in hand with the idea that we have a lot of seasonal uniforms now. We have a seasonal for Halloween, summer, winter or Christmas, and now April Fools. I really thought the April Fools things was going to live and die with Deadpool and Gwenpool, but no. It came back with Thanos and Squirrel Girl, which means it's here to stay. And it also means that we are now clocking 4 or 8 full seasonal uniforms every single year. That's a lot of seasonal uniforms. 8 is a lot. It's multiple updates worth of uniforms. And so that in and of itself can be an issue. But then, of course, if they're not very strong, then it's like, hey, it's more of like a luxury thing. It's more of like a trophy thing. But then when you look at the meta and you're like, wow, Ghost Rider's meta. Storm's meta, huh? Luna's meta? Oh, shoot. Thanos' meta? Magneto's meta. And you're like, wow, there's a lot of meta characters who are not available for like 350 days of the year. And that's a big problem. Like, yeah, the seasonal's coming up for winter or whatever, right? So that's nice. But then on the flip side, it's like, yeah, but then if you miss it, you're screwed for 350 days. And some of these characters, like Magneto, don't have alternatives. They really don't. On the other hand, no single class may have gotten it worse this year than combat females, and in particular combat female heroes. But for this year's case, you can talk about villains as well, combat female villains as well. They basically don't exist. And yeah, all the best ones were released a year ago or further, which is insane to think about. Titania's uniform still being the best and being over a year old. It really is sort of an open secret at this point in Marvel Future Fight, where combat female types are by far the most neglected class, and it's brutal. It's brutal to see how they do characters like Nebula so dirty, despite these characters appearing in multiple pieces of content that they can pull from, TV shows, movies, etc. Even with characters like Crescent, who have no excuse because they can get a uniform every year like their Luna and Sharon Rogers counterparts. But the devs decide, you know what? No, we screwed up twice, so we're just going to give up on the character. Very, very bizarre here. Speaking more broadly about the cost of building up characters. Since the introduction over a year ago of tier 4s, we haven't seen any reduction in the cost of tier 3s. So that's actually my number 7 here. No cost reduction for basically anything. I'll start by talking about no cost reductions for tier 3s because we did see a heavy cost reduction for tier 2 not that long ago, where they reduced the amount of bios required, and that also reduced the amount of gold and black antimatter and things like that required. But since then, we haven't seen any reductions for tier 3 materials. Now, judging by my tier 3 material amounts, you might say, oh, we don't need those reductions. But I am in a very extreme minority of players. Most players are not sitting on almost 6 digits worth of tier 3 materials. So Certainly, they found a way to give people something to do with CCF regarding crafting, but I still think for players that are trying to catch up, and certainly for existing players who are trying to catch up or new players, they should reduce the cost of tier 3s, maybe even reduce the cost of the first certain number of tier 3s. This is not to affect or help catch up whales or veterans, but of course for new players, right? Reducing the amount of books you need for the first 10 tier 3s of each typing, I think that would help out tremendously, and that was the whole point of reducing the bio amount and reducing the cost of ranking up characters to tier 2, so why not do it for tier 3? But you can even extend this further. How come there haven't been any reductions or changes to the cost of crafting? Right, this is such an important system, but it's now 3 years old. It's just around its 3rd anniversary. Why not reduce the cost a little bit? Why not introduce a pity system so that once you re-roll a certain crafted stat enough times, it sort of gives you what you want after a certain number of pumps for each star? I mean, there's certainly tons of things they could do. They could even offer limited time events where it costs 50% less to craft, right? So that you could incentivize crafting. There's so many things they could do here to sort of reduce some of the load on players. And in particular, it benefits those of us trying to catch up, which is really good. ManThing represents number 6 because he has the brand new ability Panic, which up until, the tail end of 2023 was the only new ability introduced into the game for the skill name glossary. Now, that's not 100% true. There were actually 2 other skills added to the game, but not in the form of character skills or passives, but in the form of the clash and wall effects that the CTP of Conquest offers. And while those are cool, they're tied specifically to a CTP. So you can give them to any character, but you have to give them the CTP. So it becomes very, myopic. On the other hand, new skills, right? We have a lot of skill effects. Don't get me wrong: snare, stun, incapacitate, paralysis. But to only introduce one new skill effect the whole year, I find to be a little bit disturbing, right? You do want to see a bit more creativity on the part of the devs, and in particular to introduce effects that still don't have any way to get around debuffs, to not affect any change to that system, to continue to make debuff a way to basically ignore 95% of the features that I'm scrolling through right now, and to look at something like, Fracture, which was introduced 6 years ago, and this is the only ability that interacts with debuff by just completely ignoring it, right? Which is great, but what have they been doing since then? Introducing all these things that just basically have zero interaction and are completely negated in large parts by the effects of debuff removal. Moving into the top 5, I could have stayed with ManThing, but Cassie is a much better example of the number 5, which is that new characters are weak. They're so weak and in large part so useless, it is painful. And that goes for ManThing, and that goes for Cassie, and that goes for Sylvie. Right? All of these new characters this year essentially have nothing to do in the game and just get completely bodied by the content that is certainly not built for them, even when they have access to tier 3 or Transcendence at the beginning. Now, Cassie is the worst example of this, the best example of this, and maybe like Omega Red is the worst example of it. And certainly you can make the argument that, new characters are still good for new players because they don't need uniforms to be good, etc. But yeah, the vast majority of people playing the game are not new players. So you sort of have to balance them a little bit, right? And so while Sylvie may be good for new players, and she was free for a time, she has no use for anyone but new players. And that is a huge waste of a new character. And it makes me especially worried, and that's why this cracked the top 5 here, because the devs have stated in their dev note recently that they plan on releasing a lot of new characters. If they're going to release a lot of Sylvies and Cassies and ManThings, they're wasting their time. They're straight up wasting their time. These characters are bad for the majority of players, and they're useless, and they just clog up your roster and waste resources, and they basically represent empty hype. Like, really, Omega Red is the only one that sort of defeats this because he's so popular and he's so cool, and because also, it's difficult to get your hands on very effective villains early on as a new player because most villains are very expensive or native tier 2 or whatever. But even Omega Red is not immune to this criticism. So I really need the devs to start either making these characters a lot stronger or giving them other effects, other synergies, other passives, to make them useful to the rest of the player base. Or they can tweak game modes to make characters like this, like Sylvie, like Cassie, actually useful and needed so that it justifies every player building them up. Coming in at number 4, we have bad artifacts and characters who get 0 rework and still get an artifact which basically forever crucifies them and commits them to mediocrity. Perfect example here, Minerva gets no rework, gets no uniform, and then gets a stinky artifact that ignores dodge and increases basic attack. This is a terrible artifact and essentially means that she is just forever resigned to mediocrity. Same goes for someone like Korath here. He just gets basic attack and increased HP. These are just absolutely terrible artifacts which have almost no use whatsoever for the character, make no difference, right? Do nothing to sort of fix any of the problems the character has. Doesn't open up any new ways to play the character as a support, as a PvP, whatever. And then again, just like I said, resigns them to mediocrity. Now, in saying this, I'm acutely aware of the fact that there are some artifacts for good characters that are bad like this. So there are some exceptions to this. Like, for example, Venom has the same artifact as Korath, but Venom is obviously pretty good. Black Bolt is another example of a character, as soon as I can find him, who has the exact same artifact as Minerva. And of course, we know how insane Black Bolt is. So there's always the possibility, right, that these characters could get insane, jaw-dropping, back-breaking reworks and uniforms in Tier 4s that basically make these artifacts being bad irrelevant. However, the artifacts being bad have another layer of shittiness to them. They're shitty for the first reason, which is that it sort of, makes... If a bad character gets a bad artifact, it's the kiss of death, in a way. However, it also dilutes the pool. It dilutes the pool, and the pool is already very, very full at over 150 here. So that means every time you save up your tokens and you're like, hey, I'm going to go and buy, some artifacts. I got some crystals or I got some celestial essence. You're pulling for the from the available, artifacts. And yeah, you've got this laundry list of just, oh my God. And here's the thing, especially when you're gambling with essence, when they add one bad artifact to the game, they're actually adding 4 bad artifacts here. Kicking off the top 3, one of the biggest elephants in the room, PvP. We did see the addition of a new game mode, Otherworld Battle, which is great, but it came with flaws. And the existing flaws of the existing PvP content, particularly Alliance Conquest, but also Timeline Battle, saw 0 reworks. And this really pains, in my opinion, a majority of players. A majority of players who are still with the game after almost 9 years are looking for new ways to use their roster, and PvP jumps out at all of them as the way to do it. However, the devs continuously ignore these game modes, making them seem even less appealing after 9 years for the diehard fans. And that's disappointing because PvP is by far the easiest thing to monetize, and also something that could easily give them tons of evergreen content because you're basically competing against other players and you're competing against a self-evolving meta, which is almost like playing against an AI in chess that's constantly improving itself. So the devs really need to start paying attention to PvP. I don't have a long spiel prepared for this. It's just kind of sad. And taking second place is bad MCU updates. My goodness, have the MCU updates, in particular the movies, been so poorly handled this year in Marvel Future Fight. Now, don't get me wrong. The legendary battles have been pretty good, both in terms of the gameplay and the aesthetics and cinematics and the rewards. But if you look at the characters, if you look at characters like Ant-Man, if you look at characters like anyone from this Captain Marvel update, even if you look at Gamora and Star-Lord and Rocket and Groot, there are so many lame, disappointing, misleading, terrible, useless characters all tied to MCU content. And a lot of people would say, hey, that's poetic justice, baby. The MCU has been on a shit trend. So naturally, it would be reflected in the game. However, it's kind of worrying for the game, and that's why it's my number 2 disappointment, because the game actually kind of lives and dies on MCU updates. It doesn't exactly, but we're certainly in a much better position for the game's future when we can, generate hype for good MCU updates. So I really hope that the teams behind the MCU updates get a handle on this. They have been delivering a lot of bad food to the player base. Now, the one notable exception is the Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse update. But even that, it's a Sony property here, so it's not like you want to be ringing that bell and saying, hey guys, you did such a good job with the property that's in association with Marvel, but not actually Marvel, in a game that's Marvel. You know, it's a bit of an embarrassment that you guys let even a banger like GOTG3 get completely overshadowed within a month by other content, right? Super disappointing here. Not to mention the fact that more than half of the uniforms Rocket Group were just terrible from day one, beyond superficial aesthetics. And even within the Spider-Verse update, despite having stellar aesthetics, you had useless characters like 2099 and Spider-Woman that deserved a second pass because they're just not that good. And don't even get me started on Miss Marvel and Spectrum. The #1 spot unfortunately goes to Team Up Collections. Holy shit. I could not have thought up a worse system if you put me on some sort of insane LSD-inducing drugs and locked me in a room full of clowns and knives for a week. This shit is so bad, it hurts my soul. And I don't know who to feel bad for, the players or the people who thought this up. But truly, this is one of the dumbest, stupidest, most boring, and ugliest systems the devs have ever created. And I genuinely need them to accelerate, to rapidly accelerate how we collect tokens. Please just abandon this system. Abandon your hopes, your lofty goals for making money off of this system. Just abandon those hopes and just make the system super free-to-play friendly so that people can complete it really fast, and just forget about it. Just forget about it. Because if you try to make this your next big whale milking fiesta, my God, are you going to have an absolute shit show on your hands. This is just, I hate this system with every fiber of my being. It is so stupid. It is so boring. It doesn't feel good at all. It feels horrible anytime I have to interact with it. I cannot say enough bad things about it. I genuinely cannot express how much hatred I have in my heart for this abomination. And it's only going to get worse as they add more team-up collections. So I'm really, really appealing to the devs here. Whatever heart they have, just shower us with tokens so that we can just upgrade this garbage system and be done with it. Because if this shit lingers, it's going to stink. It's going to stink up the whole game. So there's my top 10. Hit me up in the comments down below with your thoughts. What were your top 10 disappointments in Marvel Future Fight? Thank you so much for watching. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.